So the first speaker today is Tim Barlow from St. Leonard's College, Director of Technology Innovation. And this session will focus on the successful rollout of the Schoolbox in your schools. We will look at it from an e-learning leader's perspective and how your schools can maintain success after rollout. So having said that, over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Wow. You can clap for me. Thanks, Roberto. I feel privileged to be here in this setting. It's kind of really exciting to be at the MCG. As Roberto said, my name's Tim Barlow. So I'm on the executive leadership team at St. Leonard's College. I'm the Schoolbox guy there too, I suppose, and so that's got to do with technology. When we rolled out Schoolbox, it was a new thing, and that's, I suppose, innovative. And so if it's something to do with technology, and if there's something new or innovative, then it's my fault. And so that's, I suppose, why I'm here talking to you today. I thought we'd do a little story, in terms of 3 sections. So I want to tell you a bit about our story of our school as we kind of rolled out Schoolbox. And then when I think about that story, I'll say, well, I think this is why we were successful. These are the things which we did well. And then I think it's worthwhile, particularly I know there's some schools who are just starting to roll out Schoolbox. So then from our story and the things that were successful, how can you replicate this and how that can kind of come to your school too? So that's what I'm hoping to kind of cover off today, and I hope that's really helpful. So the first one is obviously our story. So it starts back in 2015. 2015 was the year that we signed on with Schoolbox, and this is what we had back then. So we did have an intranet. It wasn't particularly full-featured. It did have a whole bunch of really static content, so it was just kind of a website. You'd go there and you'd look at a page, and nothing would change very much. We're a synergetic school, so parents could kind of access the synergetic commuter portal, but again, not a lot of information there. And at that time, in 2015, we were super keen to introduce continuous reporting. And so we were looking hard around the place at that. And the products which we had at that time certainly weren't able to do lots of things, and they certainly weren't able to do continuous reporting. So there's potentially, I suppose, 2 slides in this. So we just added Schoolbox into our mix of platforms. That's what it looks like now. It looked a little bit different in 2015. We're super happy to have it. But really, we did decide to use Schoolbox for continuous reporting. That's why we did it. We didn't do it for any other reason. It was very, very specific, very, very targeted. I've spoken before at Schoolbox Meetups about continuous reporting, so maybe we're going to get a little bit of 2-in-1, I was thinking yesterday as I was kind of going through the presentation. But it's important to think that is the reason, kind of the one reason. And then our story again, so we were like, we want to go into continuous reporting, and we're going to get Schoolbox. And then we thought a lot about that. So the academic leadership team and the principal would sit around and we'd think quite a lot about how we were going to do it, what were going to be the implications for people, how we're going to make sure that this one thing was really, really successful. This whole concept of the difference between traditional reporting and continuous reporting was something we kind of looked really heavily into, and that is, that traditional reporting, you're teaching the entire time, you're assessing the entire time, you're writing all the comments on students' work the entire time, throughout the entire semester. And then at the end of the semester, you have to write another big chunk of text, or a reasonable chunk of text for everything you teach. And then you get given all the other proofreading things, and you have to kind of proofread other people's reports, and that also takes a lot of time. And because you haven't told anybody how they're going in the semester, you've also at the end of term one, you go say, well, here's a little bit about how you're going. And then at the end of the semester, you've got to re-enter all your grades, which you did in your Excel or somewhere else kind of in February or March. And so what we thought about that, and we thought, well, we don't want it to be like that. So we'll assess things as they're completed. We'll have some number. This was our thinking. We thought, well, you'll still do the same amount of work, but it'll be spread throughout the semester. We don't really care about proofreading so much. No progress reports, because everyone knows exactly what's going on the entire time. And you get a holiday too. It's funny how when you change to something new and better, people really quickly forget about how bad they used to have it. And so if you say to our teachers now, they fully get the Queen's Birthday weekend and the Cup weekend, and that's a right. They don't expect to be working the entire weekend there. But it's not long ago that the expectation, again, the culture, was that they did have to work that entire time. Again, thinking about the one thing we wanted to do in terms of our story was that we had some expectations. These have changed a little bit. This is what they were last year. They're very similar this year. It's hard to see. But this is basically a slide which says, if you are teaching a subject, whether it's a primary year, so we're continuous reporting, Schoolbox K to 12, you will have to do, there are some expectations which you'll have to meet. So they're different for primary as they are to a subject in secondary that only sees their students once a week. And those expectations, again, are different to what they are from a secondary teacher who sees their students 3 times a week. We have 80-minute periods, so kind of 3 80-minute periods is the most. But we thought about that and thought about, well, what are going to be our kind of absolute expectations that you cannot do anything less than, I suppose. So thinking about very clear expectations when we thought strategically about going forward. And then, so in late 2015, so we signed with Schoolbox, I think in June 2015, so some time ago now. We then did some work, and it wasn't until really October, November, December that staff then started putting due work items into the courses area of Schoolbox. And that was all we wanted them to do. So obviously if you're going to report, you need to be putting due work items into Schoolbox, and that's what we did. And so we've got everything from prep to we're VC and IB at years 11 and 12. So all of those courses are all populated, and that's just, all we said was just put due work items in. So what did you do this year? If you did a test and a project and a prac report in science and then an exam, and then you did another little quiz, then put those things in there and then think about how you're going to weight them, and then that's just what you'll do next year. You'll just do it exactly the same way, you'll just do it in a different platform. So we kind of did all that work. That then led to having teachers, again, they just taught, they just collected the work, they marked the work, instead of putting it into Excel or their paper mark book, they just put it into the Schoolbox mark book. So same thing happening the entire time, really, really simple. And of course that then led to all parents and students and staff being able to know exactly what is happening with their child and their learning the entire time. And so I think more and more schools are thinking about continuous reporting. And one of the things I love about these events, quick tangent, is that you get a chance to talk and learn from so many other schools, which is often really difficult because we're so siloed. So I'm happy to talk about that in the coming days if you kind of want to tap me on the shoulder. I'm the tall guy. But so we can now see what everybody is doing the entire time. Very, very transparent, and it was just, you just kind of mark your work. And so we do now have a portal that the entire community visits every single day. Certainly teachers and students, and probably half the parents. It's often one parent does it. We consider it a huge success. I wouldn't know what we would do without it. I would be really, really concerned if someone said you've got to change LMSs or something like that. So that's not something we want to do. It's worth pointing out that we do have some blue boxes there, and they actually point to other areas. So Learning Analytics goes to a product called Track One, which we use. We do have online files and folders like your old shared drive. So we have a product still called SharePoint, just for teaching documents that they share. You might have your Google Drives or something like that. We also have a WordPress, a kind of a web publishing platform running, which is where we do have lots of our just kind of static content. But again, it all launches out of here. So that's our story. So that's the first part of this little talk I want to give you. And so the next part is, so why do I think we were really, really successful? And I remember it was like 6 months after we launched Schoolbox, Roberto or something said, your school is one of the top 3 engagement schools that we have. Everybody is going to Schoolbox all the time, it looks like. Really great job. And I thought, well, that's lovely to hear. But so the question is, why were we successful? And I think it's good to break that down. And so when you're thinking about that in terms of introducing a change, is how do you stop people resisting change. So no matter what you want to do differently, it's like that great cartoon, who wants to change? Or who wants there to be change? Sorry, it goes, yeah, we should change everything. And says, well, who wants to change? I said, I don't want to change. And so kind of how do you get over that is one thing to think about. I had this slide up before, so this was really a sell though. So you've got to think about how you're going to communicate, as Adam was saying, to different stakeholders, the benefits of the change or whatever you're going to do. So people do have a tendency to, if they're asked to change, they focus a little bit on the negative. So really, how can we get people on board? How can we tell them that it is going to be a better thing? This slide is great for telling teachers about continuous reporting. Again, so that's kind of the way we did it. And telling them that it's going to be a better thing. We also told parents, again, massive stakeholders in their children's education, but we talked to them about this is what we're going to do. You've got to communicate changes to people. We're doing it because it is better for your child's education. It's better for you as a parent. And again, really strategic in the key decisions, the key actions that we're going to take. And we know why we're going to do them. So we know why, we thought about it before, and we are able to articulate that very clearly to various different people. So that is one reason that we were successful, so you don't get a great deal of kickback. Sometimes I do get kickback, none about continuous reporting. If you build a website, so Schoolbox is a website, if you build a website and no one visits it, it's a failure. That the whole point of putting things online on the internet is to get people to visit it. That's what the World Wide Web is. That's what it's all about. And Schoolbox is you are rolling out a website. You've got to build a server. You've got to put Linux on it. It's got to be available to everybody. But hopefully we all know with our phones in our pockets how much information there is out there these days. There's so much stuff, and it's super entertaining. All the games, all the websites, all the social media. So you are competing really, really heavily with everyone's attention. Our attention is quite valuable. It's like $250 a year in advertising dollars, every single one of us, to the Googles and the Facebooks and all those kind of businesses. So how are you going to kind of compete with people for their attention? And you've got to give them a reason to visit your site. So again, you've got to think about the user and what is going to get them to go to where you want them to go the entire time. So what is your hook going to be? And I thought we picked a great hook in terms of why we were successful. We picked grades as the hook. If you want to get students and parents to visit your portal all the time, you just put the students' grades up all the time, and then they will visit kind of all the time. You'll get guaranteed repeat visitors and guaranteed success, depending on what your metric is. But you put up a grade, the kids are going to check it out. That's the way it is. And if you put up a grade, the parents, depending on how they are, we've got the Schoolbox app, so some of them will get a ping on their phone the instant a kid gets a grade, and they'll look straight away. And most of them get an email once a week saying, this is what's been happening with your learning. But that is a very good hook, that's for sure. But importantly about that, again, I've alluded to it, there is one big strategic initiative. Technically, we had news too, so we did use the news component. We used to do that, sending out the PDF on Friday night in terms of the newsletter. And so the ELC, the kindergarten kids would also get the news about the Year 12 students' formal coming up, and so it was nearly 20 pages, a ridiculous kind of thing. So moving to news too. But it was really continuous reporting. That's it, nothing else. So we did have, why we were successful, I think we had one strategic initiative, and we only had one. Another thing that we did was that we cut ties to the old ways to doing it. And another way of saying it, I think, is leadership and kind of pushing your thing. So if you leave the old ways open and available, that's actually one of the main ways that I see in different schools, one of the main ways I see that initiatives fail. Because people, again, they don't like change. They're happy doing things the way they've been doing it. So if you leave the old way, whatever it was, open and accessible and acceptable to even some level, then some people will not shift. So Barry, he still likes doing his reports at the end of each semester. And we're okay with that. We were like, well, some of you can do continuous reporting. Some of you can still do it at the end of the semester. "Whoa, that wouldn't have been a really fun time for us." So you do have to just stop whatever the kind of big thing is. You can't let the old way happen anymore. So kind of however you do that, you make it impossible, so you turn it off, or really, really culturally unacceptable. So again, it's kind of building culture. But I do hear that tale a number of times, and it does require some brave leadership to say, we are confident with what we're doing. This is the best thing to do. You've got communication happening, but you really, really do need to kind of cut that out entirely. I've had stories of people say, it's really great to see. I gave a presentation about continuous reporting, and someone said, that's great that you've done. I think that'd be really good. We couldn't do that at our school. Glennis, she would kick up way too much of a fuss, and no one would, you wouldn't want to deal with that. I wasn't comfortable with that. Deal with it and be very brave with your leadership, that's for sure. Timing is an interesting one. So you've got to have the exact right amount of time, but actually if you have too much time, it can get a little bit, this is never going to happen. So we did install it in June 2015, like I said. We did lots of work on the IT side of things, setting it up, comms teams, marketing teams, or kind of invisible, a little bit of work. And so it's only 6 months out. Teachers, we really only gave a couple of months. They didn't have heaps and heaps of work to do back in that time, Just what are you going to assess? How much is it going to be worth? But we did also dedicate an appropriate amount of time to the strategic initiative. So that is, we gave a keynote to stakeholders, keynote to staff saying this is the change, this is why we're going to do it. We, the meetings that were dedicated to whatever administrative crap was going on, or faculty time, we said, well, those meetings are now focused on this thing. This is important, and so we are going to give you this time to get the important work done. Faculty time, so it's about making sure you have the right amount of time. I think it can be dangerous if you have a really long lead time for teachers, because sometimes they'll get in and some people will go hell for leather and they'll do really great work, but they can get a bit burnt out because it's like, well, no, stop doing the work, it's not going to be live yet. So that kind of timing I think is difficult. I felt like we had a good time. This is what you have to do. It's a little bit of work. And in terms of support for teachers, again, Adam said it, it's an increasingly demanding job in terms of expectations. If you're doing the NCDD, yes, people who giggle, you will know that the expectations are continuing to increase. But we provide support to teachers in a way that we would expect to provide it for students. So I hope we're all awesome at teaching and providing great or designing great learning environments. So again, with our teachers, we provide online support the entire time, that flip model. The great thing about the flip model or providing videos online about Schoolbox is that the Schoolbox trainers make these awesome videos for you. You don't have to do it yourself. And then you can either send them to the kind of Help Schoolbox site, or what we do is we pinch we don't pinch, we just embed the appropriate YouTube videos in our teacher professional learning site. So again, it's kind of stuff is there the entire time. So anytime, anywhere learning for teachers. Things like importing a course, if you only do it once a year, quite a lot of people forget how to do something if they only do it once a year. So you've got to have somewhere where they can kind of go and learn again. But we also, again, when we're rolling it out, we provided, the big keynotes, we provided the flipped learning model, we provided small group instruction, we provided kind of the project-based learning of saying this is your job and what you have to do, and you'll kind of learn it going forward. So again, thinking about how you're going to make sure that happens or how the staff are going to learn the new thing is really, really important, that support. And so that was about why I think we were successful. So that was our story, it was continuous reporting, why we were successful, so some of those things that we did, and I think is why it worked. But I do know, and I hope we all know, that every single school is really quite different, particularly in its culture and its staff and the way they do things. And so how do you replicate this in your school? And we've done a few things a couple of times. There's that whole, if you build it, they will come. And this will work. If you just kind of put it there, this will definitely work for some people and some things. A great example of this, you introduce a new platform, you'll have some of those trailblazing teachers who just go, yes, I want to do that new thing, and they'll do it superbly. but you can't have just a couple of people doing it. Great examples of this is things like online submissions. So I didn't even mention online submissions in 2015. I didn't say you can get your kids to, submit their work online in Schoolbox, but nearly everyone's doing online submissions all the time now. It's never, ever been a push. Rubrics, we didn't even talk about rubrics. I know that some schools have kind of pushed that as a thing. We said, no, just a due work item, just a title, weighting, not too much, keep it simple. Heaps of people are using rubrics in Schoolbox the entire time because it's such a fantastic feature. Plagiarism checking. So again, didn't talk about it, didn't say you can do it or it's there, but again, they did online submissions and they're like, wait a second, what's that little percentage plagiarism thing there? And so there's some things that people have done and the culture has brought those things along as long as those baseline expectations were met. So you can't expect to just install it and have everybody come along. So if you build it, will they come? And so that's again thinking about what is the thing or the things, not too many, that must happen for your initiative to be successful. What absolutely must happen, and that's again the leadership team to decide on that, and so making sure everybody comes. And then that question again of getting a platform happening, how will you make them come? So what will be your hook? Personally, I like reporting. I think that's quite a good one. I actually also like course material, so building your courses, making sure everyone has a course, and in that course there's at least one YouTube video, there's the course outline, and maybe there's a handout. So not too much stuff. I think that's good. I think e-portfolios is a good kind of hook to kind of go with at the start. Getting just middle years in particular, I think is good for that. Using that, every kid has to be using e-portfolios, and in every subject you have to get at least one e-portfolio page going in your class this semester. Not too difficult to do. Pastoral care is a great one. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do that. So we use pastoral care, but that's just for teachers. News and calendar, I think that's a kind of basic one to do. But one thing I would recommend is 10 years ago, LMSs used to be, here's your class page. You build it up throughout the year and make it awesome because you've got you as a teacher with those 20 kids. And then at the end of the year, you'll have a different class with a different 20 kids. So that class page, we're going to archive it and make you start again. And we do that with class pages. So we didn't say make them really awesome. We respect teachers' time. So maybe not that one, but there's a lot to choose from, obviously. So have a really think about what your hook is going to be. And this is making sure that it fits with your strategic plan. And it also will ensure that your audience is engaged, so teachers and other people. But that's all about how will you define your success. Again, kind of keeping it really, really simple. This is kind of a breakdown of what I think you should do with however kind of you want to do it. So it is, again, I've said this kind of a number of times, you've got to pick one. If you want to do two, that's fine. If you pick a lot, you'll set yourself up for failure. Pick a big impact item, again, that people go, well, this has been great. It hasn't been huge work, but the impact of that has been very big. Explain the benefits. You've got to bring people along. You have to communicate to teachers and parents and all those kind of things. You've got to make the old way impossible. That cannot happen anymore. You do have to give enough time, but you actually can't give too much time. Don't say, well, in 2022, that's when we're really going to hit go. Like, be brave and be bold, and don't waste too much time. But then again, there's that giving staff time or giving staff support to making things happen. And I think that's a bit of a checklist to how that should work. And that's how we launched Schoolbox, but we actually did that exact same thing when we launched BYOD in 2013. It's how we launched our first online portal in kind of 2012. It's how we launched Learning Analytics. We have Track 1. It's how we got a reasonably new faculty called DigiStem. So that process is how we've done it. And also you can do that with Schoolbox. So if you've done news, now add e-portfolios. This is your next strategic initiative. Or then add courses. And once you've done that, then add reporting. And so one new thing each year, you will build a culture surrounding good use of technology. But we are all doing the most important job on the planet. So we're educators, So it is important to pick a good change. Make the change purposefully. Look at your school and say, well, this is what we need most, and really kind of focus on that. Get that one thing right and then build and build and build. There's no questions now. Like I said before, I do get schools visit me every kind of week or two and calls and emails. I think these are great to just talk to other people. We're going to do a question time at the end, and I'm now going to hand over to the next group, but I hope that was really helpful.
Thank you, Tim. Before you leave, on behalf of Schoolbox, a bit of a gift. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So now we are going to have three members of King's Christian College. We have Anthony Giovas, Deputy Head of Secondary, Mal Galler, Director of Curriculum Innovation, and Joe Robinson, Database Administrator, to complement this rollout presentation. Thank you.
Do you want to do it? Let me do that.
Do you need the presenter notes?
No. We're good. Cool. All right, well, morning all. It's great to actually be here. This is our first Schoolbox Meetup that we've come to. I thought a little bit of context of who we are and why we were at the point of changing to Schoolbox. King's is what was a small school that's now a very big school. We were one campus, we now have two. In 2020 we'll have our third campus starting. So we do early learning right through to year 12. On our main site we also have a trade training centre. And so we've gone from what originally might have been a 500 student school up to about 3,000 across the various campuses. And so change brings problems that we needed to solve. And so we've just said our aim of Schoolbox was actually to solve two problems. One of them, which was probably our biggest one, was our staff. Staff are far too busy. And a lot of the busyness is on which email was that in, was it posted somewhere else, do I find it on the notices, was that a handout that someone gave, rather than, am I doing a good job in my classroom? Are my kids learning? And so one of our big aims was we needed that work intensification to be simplified back to something efficient and effective that put things where I needed to see it as a teacher. Our catch with that, though, was we had systems in place, and generally they worked-ish. But as we grew, as the next campus came online, those things suddenly weren't really cutting it. We had staff who were across campus, and we had staff that might have had something to do with a high school teacher that may have had a little bit to do with a primary school, but we didn't want every bit of information in somebody's face and us all sifting what was going on from early learning right through the trade training. Staff needed their stuff so that they could know what they were doing and then move on. And the second bit that was really a flow-on from that was student organisation and communication. Same deal, they were getting the notices, like we heard the PDF that told you everything that was going on. It was just a barrage of stuff coming in. We're saying, why aren't kids organised? Why don't they know what's going on? But there's 400 things on the list that they need to have read, but only 10 of them are actually relevant to them. So, I mean, several years ago, we actually did away with paper diaries for the students in the high school. We're heading in a digital age. We work digitally, but how do we prepare kids for that? It's not something we throw out, oh, they're digital natives, but nobody teaches the skills of how do I run my digital calendar? How do I organise my life in a digital world? You know, well, we're great at that. We can play our games and we can sort this and we can Facebook and Snapchat and all the other things, but who actually prepares them for a digital workforce? And so we're finding paper diaries were doing nothing. Kids weren't writing homework down, kids weren't showing anyone, kids weren't opening it. But then what do we do to replace that with something that's actually effective? So in a sense, they were kind of both the same problem, just from two different areas. And so all of our planning and process was about how do we solve these two issues rather than let's bring in a new program to the school. You know, we're going to introduce Schoolbox, or in our state we call it Compass. So rather than, oh, here's a new software we're going to use, we're actually solving the two problems. And so that kind of gave us the parameters that we needed to plan around. And I think really in our long-term solutions, planning is the key to making something successful. So we needed staff to have access to information across the whole college if they needed it, but that the things they needed day to day was in their face, all there together. You didn't have to search for it, you didn't have to find it, it was just there. But as a high school teacher at our Reedy Creek campus, I could very easily find out what was going on in primary school at our Pimpamar campus if I needed to. But it's not congesting my day-to-day work. We needed something that was streamlined, that worked efficiently, and that made sense. With growth comes more staff, and we don't have time to be training staff in complicated processes every time you have a staff member turnover. We needed to go, this actually makes sense when you look at it. It's obvious this is where you go, this is what you do. And so we wanted the system to actually encompass that, because a lot of what we were doing made sense if you'd used it forever, but new staff, not really. We needed students to then have that tailored information provided to them, which I think we all know how Schoolbox works with that. And we needed it to work with TAF, which is our student information system, in an automated way. So a lot of what we were doing had been bolt on, and so someone actually had to sit a kid change class, someone had to go across to the other learning management system and enrol them in the class and take them out of the old one. We needed that sort of time waste to disappear. So practically what did it look like? An automated system and a reduction in all the programs we were using. So we were running 2 different learning management systems in various areas of the school. We had the plagiarism program. We had the facilities booking program. We had a separate staff portal. We had calendars, multiple calendars, so every different area of the school was running their own calendar however they saw fit. We had parent Facebook pages, which was great in providing some information, but then opened up a whole other plethora of problems that we wanted to get rid of and replace with something that worked. And then we also had a vast array of email groups, so you were getting emails, some really relevant to you, some completely irrelevant, but you could spend an hour a day just sifting through what was there. So they were the things that we needed to solve, because ultimately we wanted teachers focusing on good teaching and student learning, not trying to find out what was going on tomorrow that was going to interrupt their learning that they had no idea where to find. So that being the case, we then sat down and deliberately talked about what our change management would look like. We often change, our staff are actually really good. Change happens quite regularly and staff are relatively good with following through with that, but you get to a point where it's change fatigue. We can't keep adding something new, changing something new. It was killing staff. You would see the passion and love of teaching being replaced with the monotony of administration. And we're like, that's not what we want. So we broke it down into a few phases, and our first phase really was replacing all those old things with the one new system. We weren't particularly going for let's improve the whole thing and let's use all of it, but the things that we're doing now in 20 platforms, let's roll it in and all be able to do it in one. In the one place, and actually make it work properly. And the second part of that is, I guess, we realised that staff are all at different points in their skill level. So thinking that we were going to bring something in and every staff member at the end of term 1 would be at this point and have this done and be capable of using it well was really setting up for failure if that's what we were thinking. So we're thinking everybody was using the old LMS. If you can put your new material onto the new one, that's a great success, because we're now using our bookings, all those things are running through Compass or Schoolbox rather than 10 different portals. So that was our first year with staff. Just transferring and using all the things you're already using our technology for, but through Schoolbox product. So that was some corporate changes. as well as some individual changes in various departments. Corporately, things like the old staff portal was dismantled. And it was very true. If you leave it there, it will never go away. So there were, I think, 2 portions of the old portal that we kept, but it's been embedded into Schoolbox, but the rest of the things that were on the portal are gone. It meant structural change, so it made us review how other things were running. So all the calendars were taken in hand, pulled back in and centrally controlled, systemised so they're all the same way, and then pushed out through Schoolbox. So there's now a uniform manner, so no matter which campus, no matter which department, when you look at it, you know what's going on. Our notices was another thing. So student and staff notices, all the old methods were gone. You now had to use Compass or Schoolbox to make that happen. And so all of those things were really about shifting staff to make their life easier. Oh, I don't have to look here, or here, or here, or here, or search for the emails and who sent it and what was the title of it. It's all on the page. And so various areas of the school are using it far better than others. Let's be real. It's not a perfect world where we can say every teacher's doing a fantastic job and it works spectacularly. It does work well, but every area is using the product to the same or slightly better standard of what was happening with the previous products. And so to that, we're happy to say that is a success. And then later we'll talk a bit about how we move forward from there. Then I'll let Mal keep going.
Cool. Good morning, everybody. So, look, I just want to take you through a little bit of the process, a little bit of the nuts and bolts of actually how you get from, hey, we've made a big call, a big decision here. We're going to go with Schoolbox. All right, now what does that mean? You know, what kind of processes have you got to go through in that? So we moved towards, we were actually moving towards multiple campuses. I don't know if Anthony mentioned that, and we were just going, well, that's huge, you know, trying to communicate classes and notifications to people and all that kind of stuff over multiple different campuses, multiple audiences and so forth. So we were going, something needs to change. We also had a situation where Queensland is deciding that they want to rewrite a brand new curriculum. And that's any Queenslanders in the room? Yep. That's fun, isn't it? It's... So, you know, our old learning management system as well, it was working. It actually was working okay. You know, people were comfortable, things were great. And the additional added communication capabilities of Schoolbox, though, were the things that we were going, yeah, you know what, this learning management system's great, but this is just something else that we need. The other one is the other general changes that were occurring in the life of the school. As you know, and from our keynote before, there's lots and lots of changes going on, and this is where staff are at. So we're actually sitting there going, all right, how are we going to manage this change management process? Because there's a whole lot going on in our world. So we've got to be really, really careful with it as we transition to the new system. So the first thing we did was to make sure that the product actually performed as advertised, right? So it was all well and good to go and meet up with some really, really nice people at the Schoolbox booth over at a conference somewhere, and they showed us through and we said, does it work on mobile devices? Does it work on this? And all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's great. And I've been to plenty of those booths at Edutech and all that kind of stuff, and there's plenty of things being sold. And so we were like, yeah, but does it really? So we actually went and approached a couple of schools, and we said, hey, would you mind if we came along and actually had a chat to you and work through this process and you show us how it works? And we came with a list of questions. You know, you're driving up in the car on the way there. Right, we've got to ask them about this. We've got to ask them about this. Yeah, and does it really work? You know, that was our big push. So we did speak to a couple of schools, and to be honest, we came away going, okay, fair enough. And a big shout out, one of the schools we spoke to was Sheldon College. Yeah, and a big shout out to them because they were talking to us, talking about their process, and we're like, you guys have really done your homework. This is great. So you know that was really helpful for us. So in terms of then doing that, we then said, look, okay, we've talked through potential problems, all that kind of stuff. We've got a lot of verification from other schools. Once we were satisfied, we went to our senior management team and said, okay, you know, let's do this. You know, this is fantastic. And so we said, right, we've got to onboard staff after we got the green tick. And so we said, right, we're going to call in the Schoolbox people, we're going to run a little seminar, and we'll bring in a couple of heads of department, we'll bring in middle senior managers and all that kind of stuff, have a big group marketing department, all that kind of stuff, so they could actually see for themselves firsthand. And then we'll kind of have a little bit of a litmus test just to check in and see how people are coping with this. And then they gave us a bit of feedback. After we started moving the process, we got all of our HODs on board, because we said, right, if we introduce this to the whole staff and one of us stands up and in front of the whole staff and said, hey, we're going to change this thing, we knew that was not the way to go. So we actually onboarded our heads of department first, and then they were able to actually kind of grease the wheels for us, so that we could then, when we spoke to staff, it wasn't totally fresh. Maybe all the chatter had already happened first, and it wasn't such a big shock or a big change or anything like that. Then we actually pulled our heads of department in on an afternoon, and we said, all right, this is the course creation process. Type, press, type, click the add unit, and then boom, there you go. You've now set up the framework for your courses, and so all of our heads of department, all in one hit, had set everything up straight away. And so that kind of was starting the process of actually just smoothly easing everybody into it. And then, of course, when it came to building, the platform was already in place for them. To do that. We began then training with some of the foundational principles of Schoolbox across our entire staff there, in terms of the Schoolbox help and all those kind of courses. And then we began implementing the staff communication aspect. So in a staff meeting, literally, here's the calendar, and in the back end, we were setting up all the calendaring and all that kind of stuff. Anthony was working with the marketing guys to make all that happen. And then we got all the staff in and said, right, here's how you subscribe to a calendar. Click, 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 to put their calendar through into their usual process. And then after that, we started rolling out the classroom aspects. And then some staff members, as you would imagine, had really, really negative reactions to change. And the way that I handled that was I basically handled it head on. And I walked straight up and said, and they spoke to me, and I guess I'd built that relationship so that we could do that. And I said, okay, what are your concerns? And I listened and actually took those concerns on board. And I said, look, you may be right. You may be right. This thing might not do exactly the same as what you expected. And I actually agreed with them, and then kind of walked through that process. But maybe, just maybe, this actually might improve things. And this person actually, I said, I'm going to sit down with you, help you through the process. And this person who often could have been averse to change actually turned around and said, and was one of our champions, right? Not a super duper champion, but certainly somebody I could point to in a staff meeting and say, hey, this guy's got it. And obviously all the staff would go, that's great. If he's got it and he's okay with it, let's kind of move forward with it. As we moved on, this was kind of our planning process. Okay, big giant whiteboard sitting in the room, and you can't see it obviously because I couldn't fit everything on, but I said, who are our audiences? We've got parents, we've got teachers, we've got students, right? And we wanted to know what's inside their head, what do they need, how do they need to be communicated to, all that kind of process. And we actually went through this kind of process, and we had these whiteboards up in some of the offices that people would walk into and have a chat to different staff members and all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't hidden or anything. We didn't consult everybody, but we did have it there, and we said, hey, what do you think of this? And we're like, oh, yep, hadn't thought of that. We threw up another idea and all those kind of things. So that was actually quite helpful for us. So plenty of dialogue with staff. Generally, it was well received in that respect. But there was one thing that I think was really important, and that was this. Whoops, I've got my slideshow working at the same time, was this, that we had to have someone, and Anthony's great at this, we had to have someone who was a black hat, a de bono black hat person, somebody who would say, yeah, but is it really going to work? If we actually launch this to staff right now, and we tell them this, and this, is it actually going to work? What about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And we thought, this is gold, and take on the negative criticism as a bonus to make the system better. And that's how we rolled with that. So yeah, is this a better solution than what we're currently doing with some of the questions we asked? Will it make life easier for staff, students and parent better than their current practice? And we realised quite early on in the rollout that the scale of this project would need a dedicated person to support our strategy, and that's where Jo came along.
So I was the staff member employed to run Compass, or our instance of Schoolbox. At the time, I was working in another school in the library using my database and help desk support skills when the opportunity presented itself. I'd never used or even heard of Schoolbox. In fact, I saw the position advertised on Seek and researched Schoolbox over that weekend. Just from what I learnt on the guest login, I was excited by the product and I wanted to work with it. My first few weeks at King's were spent getting up to speed. We made staff aware that I was their Compass contact and was available for queries, training and anything like that. Extensive planning that had already occurred helped me see what the college wanted to achieve. There. And this image is the plan for the staff dashboard. We listed out what information staff needed, then determined whether the left menu or a tile was the best method to access it. Our must-haves were a high school staff page, primary school staff pages for both campuses, and primary school parent pages to replace the parent group Facebook pages. We didn't make parent groups for high school parents. We found that traffic on the Facebook pages dropped off once their students got into high school. And also the expectation is for high school students to keep their parents informed themselves. The brief from our principal was for open communication. Staff can access information from other departments and campuses without being overwhelmed by information overload. We're using the staff and parent groups to achieve this. This is an example of planning compared to the finished product. The high school weekly update delivered on Google Plus was a communication strategy that was working, so we had to fit it in. A tile bank was set up with tiles linking to a live Google Doc for each week, and I will hand back to Mel to give more information on this process.
So just as we were rolling that out, in the setup, Anthony had got together and said, look, we need to have something for staff in terms of fixing up busyness and communication issues where a staff's week is not sabotaged by some last-minute plan or process or whatever. So we produced just a one-page document called a weekly update. And the weekly update was literally any changes that were going to occur throughout a week that staff actually got on the Friday of the week before. Not on the Monday, not on the, on the Friday of the week before, so that it was all prepared in advance. So the actual system was in place prior to any Schoolbox side of things. And we said, right, if we are going to actually be able to draw audiences in, right, why don't we use a system that people are actually using and is beneficial to them, and that becomes the heart of our little high school area, right? That everybody who's going to go to this page, they need this. So they've literally got a week 1 to 10 thing there, and they can click on week 1, and as soon as they go on the page, they can get that weekly update for the week. And later on, I'm going to show you the traffic of how that works. So, as you can imagine, I love this quote from Bill Gates. The first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. Second rule is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. And that is exactly what we saw. We had an efficient operation with that weekly update, and it literally magnified the efficiency of it and actually pushed people through to it. And obviously in other areas of the school, in other areas of our rollout of Schoolbox, we're like, okay, guess what? We've just magnified some of the inefficiencies that we've got. Great, that actually helps us find places that we need to fix. Just as an aside, found this website. It's the best thing ever, and another shout out to Sheldon in terms of how they've organised the way that they do things. But a lot of these graphic design rules and all that kind of stuff psychologically work so well. And one of the things that we were looking at in terms of design was that this Miller's Law there, the rule of 7 plus or minus 2 items in working memory is what people can handle. So actually when we were designing our pages, we were trying to actually pull that into place. And I've got a few examples of that later. And the other one is the law of proximity and common region, where you actually group things together so it makes sense to people. Worth checking out that website. So
So keeping Miller's Law and the Law of Common Regions in mind, we looked at our dashboards and what did we want? We wanted a clean look and we wanted quick access to what users needed. Staff must have upcoming events and the ability to access what is happening across the college. We have tiles on the dashboard that link directly to department group pages. High school students, we determined what we wanted students to have quick access to and created a tile bank. So our dashboards are functional, but we're always looking for improvement.
We surely are, and I'm always looking to improve it. So our high school page did start off a lot different to this, and then I actually went through and said, how in the world do teachers work? You know, what are we doing? For the first year, we just threw out buttons of just anything, didn't make them graphical or anything like that, just to find out how we were operating. And then I said, right, there's a whole lot of these things that can go into certain categories, and in particular, on your right-hand side, you've got these kind of things. This is day-to-day life, right? If I'm away, bang. If I need to know what duty I'm on, bang. I can just go to all those kind of things. And then as we dig further in up the topic, there's curriculum and staff culture and so on. So as you can see, we go into a student culture one. These are all the things, all the things that relate to a student and a student's world and a student's life. And then I've grouped them so that we don't have more than 7, except for that top left one over there. But, you know, we're getting there. And this is that graph I was telling you about. Basically, if this is our weekly update in action, right? So this is the high school staff going there. The dips that you see in the graph are school holidays, and yeah, we're done here. Go away. The school holidays and the weekends are the dips, all right? And then you've got 300 staff on a Monday morning, bang, have hit it. 300 staff, 300 staff, 300 staff, and it's not 300 staff, there's 300 hits, we've got about 100 staff. So what that means is it's being checked by virtually every staff member right there on that time.
So where to from here? I guess for us then, so in our measure, while things do and don't work well for us still, we would say that's a successful rollout. We've actually set out for those two things. Students are receiving information that they need to organise their life and be on top of what they're doing, and staff have condensed down to one area where they're finding the things they need. So we have made big inroads in staff busyness for all the admin tasks. So that's where we were heading from. Our improvement is really two-phase. So what's in place we want to see improve. And that's the bit that's at the top end, we'll just gradually chip forward. And those that are far behind, we want the gap to close. So again, it's just improvement in our practice. So it's not asking staff to take on something new, it's just let's keep chipping away and let's actually move you up to best practice in that area. So we're not aiming for everyone to be there, we're aiming for everyone to keep moving. And then the second area is all the different areas that we haven't yet touched on. You know, we've looked at, but we haven't started on e-portfolios, continuous reporting, even the sporting fixture, some of the pastoral care. So we're looking at then, what's our next big ticket item that we need to help everyone with? And so then we'll start planning and repeat that same sort of process. A good worked out plan, a good strategy to implement it slowly so that it becomes part of what we do without overburdening staff, but we all move forward. Because ultimately, the most important thing I'm sure we'd all agree is student learning. And we need to minimise the things that detract from that and help those things efficiently happen so that staff can do their real job well. Thank you.